Starting. Welcome, everybody. My name is Steve Gibson. Welcome to this PANA presentation, Progressive Asian Network for Action. I am a brand new, recently elected Pasadena Community College Board of Trustees, and I'm joining here as a core member of PANA. We will be having two guest speakers, as you know, tonight, Jiyoung Park and Gabriel Ramirez. There will be two of us helping to guide the discussion, myself and Jenny Chang, who is a community activist. And let's have a brief introduction of PANA right now. David, can you give a brief introduction of PANA for folks?
Got to unmute.
Sorry about that. No, I tore up those notes from last week, Steve. I'm going to do it from memory. Excuse me. Anyway, PANA arose from the APIs for Bernie Sanders for president campaign in 2016. And we continued on holding the same platform concerns, and the slogan still, we maintain the slogan, which is peace, justice, and equality for 99%. I think that we still adhere to those platform principles, the last time I checked. And in addition to that, we've taken positions on many other things, like in the Pacific region, on subsequent presidential elections, and we're active in like Koreatown, doing a project called the Neighborhood Safety Companions, Save Our Seniors network in Japanese American community, in the Pasadena community with the Democratic members of the Democratic Party, some people with California ADEMs, and so on and so forth. So there's a wide variety of things that people are involved in. Oh, I forgot to mention Glendale. Tenants work with Glendale, that sort of thing. Recently I think we've reached our sixth year or something like that, time flies. So anyway, that's what we do, and we'd appreciate any kind of support, financial included or any other type of thing, if you visit our website. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Right now, I'll introduce our two panelists, and then we'll start asking some questions and try to get some feedback about the recent election. First, I'll introduce Gabriel Ramirez. He's the proud son of working class immigrant parents from Mexico. He's the proud son of a union household. His dad was a retired grocery worker and a teamster. Proud product of local public schools. Scherpser, Rio Vista, Gridley, Rosemead High School. He has an associate degree in political science from Citrus College. He's a community volunteer, El Monte Fireworks Committee, local food banks, homeless shelters. And I'll add that I've known him for many years, and we've worked together on many great projects in the San Gabriel Valley. So that's Gabriel, and let me introduce our other panelist, Jiyoung Park. Jiyoung has been a practicing attorney for over 18 years. She worked over 6 years at a public sector union as a staff attorney, litigating cases on behalf of the union and union members before the State Personnel Board, Public Employee Relations Board, Office of Administrative Hearings, and in civil court. She represented union members in arbitration and in collective bargaining. She was a full dues-paying member of United Auto Workers Local 2350. Jiyoung currently has a private general practice which handles civil rights, labor, tenant, and social impact business matters. She's a Sustainable Economies Legal Fellow and a member of the first cohort of the Just Transition Lawyering Institute. Her pro bono and volunteer legal work has included assisting people with expungements representing people peacefully exercising their First Amendment rights, and seekers. Thank you both for being here. I'd like to see if Jenny can start us off with some questions to get started. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Wonderful to see you all. I see some familiar faces and names, return listeners, participants. Like last time, this will be a community discussion. So if you have questions, please feel free to write them in the chat and we'll make sure to get to them. It's really great to have you all friends, long time in the movement, and to finally have these conversations openly, I think is really cool. I'll start off with Jiyoung, if I may. Well, how about some opening remarks, Jiyoung, and then do I say City Clerk Ramirez? Jiyoung, would you like to start?
Yeah, I just want to thank you for having me here today and having the space to kind of debrief. And it's really cool to be back in this space after having taken a break from the PANA meetings due to the campaign. But it's cool to be back as somebody who ran for office. And that isn't something that I really anticipated, a year ago. So thanks for your support as well. The support came early on, and it was important to have that support especially from the Asian community in LA. So thank you.
Thank you. And City Clerk Ramirez, please.
Thank you. Actually, it's the first time hearing that word. Never expected to be in this position of winning an office, running for second time. But first, it can be overwhelming. I wasn't thinking about running this year until thanks to the support of the diverse in the community of El Monte, the Asians and the Latinos and others walks of life that were pushing me to run this year. And it's overwhelmingly can be overwhelming as in the campaigns, and someone that, I'm pretty sure those who ran, and it can be very nasty, and especially in my city, politics can get very brutal. But first and foremost, I just want to say thanks to Steve and to the PANA, to the whole groups and organizers here that having me for here. And so for someone who's an advocate for, for the Asians, but also for the walks of life in the community, to speak up to making sure that, everyone's being treated with equally and respected, and also at the same time that they get the proper respect and the recognition, acknowledgements around there, and those who put in their works as well. So that is something that is most important and crucial to be part of this this meeting, but also learning more a lot in our communities.
Great. Maybe we'd start with a personal, maybe what drove you all to get into activism, but more specifically to run for the particular seats that you ran for, and maybe your initial outreach to the communities that you did. Jen, would you like to start?
Sure. So
it's a big question, right?
Yeah, there are lots of, I could go throughout my whole life. I'll just say that I actually
you're a lawyer.
Yeah, but I was a fighter before then. I think I was actually in a teen coalition that was led by an activist attorney named Art Goldberg in the Echo Park area, and his daughter. So I actually did that as a teenager. And then, my kind of activism and advocacy just kind of continued on, and then continued on as an attorney. I never thought that I was going to become a judge. That was never a thought in my head until this year, when I was asked to run. So it was some ground game folks who asked me. You know, I was a ground game organizer, and you know, they asked me to fill a fourth spot on the slate of the Defenders of Justice. They already had 3 public defenders. They wanted to round it out with a fourth, and you know, it kind of I added kind of some diversity in the fact that I am a labor and civil rights attorney as opposed to a public defender. And at first I really didn't want to do it. I resisted it. I was like, oh, it's just it's just prosecutors who win. So I actually already had that concern when I was first asked to run. But I thought, well, you know, this has never been done before. This is whatever happens, this is like a conversation that needs to happen and an
So you
effort
were asked to run, and it's
yeah.
especially among friends and colleagues.
And so, yeah. And so like, that's how it came about.
You also have a union background, which we can get more into. Okay, well, how about you? May I call you Gabriel?
Actually, just call me by my name, Gabriel. It's fine. I don't title. It's great to be elected, but that title, but just my name should be fine. But anyways, how it started was I went back in 2010. There was a controversial in El Monte in 2009 corrections. There was an ex-mayor at the time, rest in peace, is no longer with us. There was a mayor at the time where there was a controversial about, you know, he was drinking and at an event, but also was drunk at the same time. There was a whole controversial at the time. And at the time I was still going to college, but I was trying to get in I was thinking to myself, maybe trying to get into, you know, not in politics. That's something never was in part of it until something that was going on, especially in 2000 around there's also initiative with the contracts, how it's operating here in El Monte still is going on. And so there was a controversy about towing companies, that one company was towing away cars that are undocumented, and those who were targeting those who spoke against the mayor at the time. And so then a new mayor came in at the time. Long and short, we thought that mayor was going to be you know, was going to be good, and apparently he worked for the city attorney's office at the time. The ex-mayor is Andre Quintero, one of the most it was very brutal at the time, where we thought we had some change. And I remember I started attending to city council meetings, and I remember how he would berate women on the dais, and also how he disrespected an ex-council member too, going after personal. I remember he went after myself, a resident who just wanted to speak about issues that were going against his beliefs. And I remember I was targeted in the parking lot verbally. And when I submit complaints, it backfired. And so I went for years after years, where he went after my family personally. And I said, you know what, enough is enough. For 11 years, going to city council meetings, speaking up, but speaking up issues that is pertaining, right, our issues. You know, I remember he would targeted another council member at the time, now is Mayor Jessica Ancona, and Vicky Martinez, and myself, right? Pretty much, you know, I remember one meeting he told me, this was before the pandemic. It was in January of 2010. I'm sorry, 2020. And I remember he was telling me, because I was speaking about contracts that, hey, this is a conflict of interest that you're receiving money from a towing company called Royal Coaches. And I remember he got so mad during public meeting. I believe I have to dig up the highlights, where he said, where did you get your law degree? From that day, from that instance, I said, wow, that, you know, it was to the point where it was time for me to run. But also I was starting to go to other cities to his connections, right? Connections of council members, any elected official that he has his power, and that's how he would get in offices. So long and short, other activists from other surrounding cities saw what he really was, something that he wasn't, right? And so other activists from San Gabriel Valleys, even from the Southeast LA, saw it, and we tried to vote him out 3 times, but it wasn't successful because, again, he was backed by, big names like, politicians. So I ran the first time for city council, wasn't successful, and I did not want it to run at the time because that was like I was going up against heavy machinery. Like it was like big money, like the big corporations of marijuana, other special interests. I'm talking about the big corporations that were donating to go after me, and I lost. But the second time this year, I did not plan on running, and I had the support from the community members that were telling me, hey, even outside from El Monte was telling me, you should run. And I said, why not go for maybe for city clerk, something that documents. It's the most important position of city clerk, is to see a lot of documents that some are confidential, but also I said, you know what, we were asking for public records. A lot of people were asking, and they were not in timely fashion because, again, back to the mayor, he had a committee team. It was a campaign team called Team El Monte. It was elected officials where he pretty much controlled the city council, city clerk, city treasurer, school boards, everything. And so luckily in 2020 he lost, and pretty much we're pretty much voting out his croonies they're still on, and some of them are still back again. So yeah, so that's something that I was never gonna run this year, but thankfully with encouragement, it wasn't easy. So
Thank you
yeah.
for sharing that. That experience, I'm sure, was valuable. Jiyoung, I know you have so much more to add. I know you've also been active in the community. Do you want to share some of that? Some of your background, your activism?
Sure. I actually got to know, acquainted with PANA through Una Liost, whom I met at the Bernie campaign headquarters in Boyle Heights. And I was actually on, I went and canvassed and all that, but I also ended up being on the legal team that filed for the injunction to keep the polls open on election day. And then she asked me to run in the ADEM election, which is happening again right now. And so please, everyone who is a registered Democrat, please order your ballot so you can vote. Yes, I remember Reggie at the office as well. That's where I met Reggie as well. Yeah, so then I ended up running for ADEMS. I was a top vote getter, and I ended up becoming the executive board member for representing my assembly district in the state Democratic Party. I was on a slate called at that time it was Assembly District 51 People's Action. It's now been redrawn, and I'm now in 8052. And we swept all 14 seats. We were running against a few other slates that were not quite as progressive. And then I ended up also somehow running for Silver Lake Neighborhood Council. I was told that I would just be a vote, and it never ends up that way. It never ends up that you're just a vote. So I've just been very, very active in my community, and have paid attention to legislation at the local and state levels, and advocated as well, and lobbied, both as an attorney and as a delegate, and as a private citizen, and as a neighborhood council board member. And then in the intro, they were also, I was also introduced as being a Sustainable Economies Legal Fellow. The Sustainable Economies Legal Center is a nonprofit org based in Oakland that tries to provide legal support and education for people who want to engage in systems that are sustainable, not just in terms of like our environment, but also just as economically speaking, like ways of having an economy and land ownership that are not exploitative, like having worker co-ops and community land trusts and things like that. I do a bunch of other things, but I'll just leave it at that.
We have a
Thank
few
you.
questions coming in, but I want to ask a question also. So we'll get to these questions in the chat that some people are putting in. It's great. I think when I observed your campaigns, I felt like they were different. They were, to me, seemed unorthodox, different types of campaigns than I was used to, and in both your cases. So, like, starting with Gabriel, could you talk about what your campaign was like, your campaign style and activities? I think that'd be of interest to me.
Yeah, certainly. So my campaign was more like authentic, like be yourself, right? Something that more realistic, meaning like, the outreach, right? But also at the same time, coming out to speak at city council meetings, right? Or your community, depending what your position you're running for, right? But also being active in the community. But at the same time, my approach was more of like social media, right? Now these days it's more different now but also, text messages, text bank, calling the traditional, but most importantly was just getting out for city councils, doing little highlights, videos, pointing out pinpoints of what it's like, but also letting the public know, right? Having like community leaders that vouch for you as well. So was more, my approach was more of like a tactic where it's more like authentic, where I'm gonna say it directly, but at the same time, that's what a lot of here in El Monte, they want that straightforwardness. They don't want they're tired of the whole same old, politician style where it's like promises, more of like authentic, say it directly, but at the same time, right? But more the people here in El Monte, where I did obviously is approach with the way you approach in their styles. As again,
Gabriel, could you
authentic.
share some examples of what your messaging was?
So my messages was, again, for instance, for my campaign was the transparency. Like mine was more like openness, meaning like getting down their questions or the answers for the public. Like it's not about knowing everything, but like, for example, I had one resident, I won't mention their names, I'll keep their anonymous. They were asking about rentals information, because a lot of people in El Monte, most of them are renters, and most of them, they say that it's not on the website. So what I end up doing is I end up, taking down their questions, but also following up, talking to our, directors in that department, right? If I can't get the answers, then I go to the next step, but also providing information like that. Something that I follow them back. That's what a lot of people in El Monte love, is the follow up back quickly, or if not, the proper answers. Remember, we don't want to give them the, winging it, right? That's what I want to call it. So
Was it a position where I'm just curious, did you feel like you can come in with a certain ideology, or was it more about showing that you had the administrative chops as far as campaigning goes?
I'm sorry, you're kind of cutting out. Can you repeat that one more time?
Yeah,
Sorry.
did you come in with like strong ideology and values for campaign for city clerk, or is it more about showing that you can do the work?
It's both, because my experiences, I did work for the library in the clerical position, but also working for currently with the other departments. So something that too, but also at the same time, getting familiar with the city clerks. Like I have a history of public records, asking public records what it's like, right? So what is not just public records as in donations, but also like, for example, like let's say the community development, like I want to see what contracts, bidding contracts do they have for the city, right? So something like that was more, but at the same time, but educating the public, like, hey, what is a public records? What is, how can I contact? How can I get that, that approach? So it's something more like educating, but also using my expertise that I did my work, but at the same time with the campaign is more like authentic, but also I did have support by the ex-city clerk, who was Jonathan Haas, who also was a city clerk at the time, that was telling me, hey, this is what to expect if you're going to run for city clerk. This is the do's and don'ts. So something like that I already got the support from, from ex-leaders that used to be in that position.
Continuing Stephen's question to Jiyoung.
Yeah, and I also want to add that I also met Steve at the Bernie HQ as well, and have worked with him on a number of things, and with PANA on a number of things, including AB 1400, CalCare, the bill for universal healthcare in California, which did not succeed, but is to be revived in the next legislative cycle, I'm told. So what was different about my campaign? Just the fact that we were actually trying to talk to people was a change for judicial elections. I think it was a lot of people's first time hearing from judicial candidates at all. That was what we set out to do as the Defenders of Justice. We were backed by the Transforming the Judiciary Coalition, which is made up of La Defensa, which is an organization co-founded by Eunices Hernandez, that works on, having a different kind of criminal justice system, or different ways of accountability, and really eventually not having police, not needing the kind of policing that we know today. It's Transforming the Judiciary Coalition also includes Ground Game LA and Working Families Party. And the goal was to educate folks about why judicial elections are important and about the need to diversify the judiciary. So, we did succeed in getting the first public defender elected ever. That's Holly Hancock. But that was the first time a public defender was ever elected in LA County since LA County started having judicial elections, and that's not right. It shouldn't be just prosecutors and administrative law judges who are already part of the government, who are only winning these judge races. So I think we did really succeed in educating a ton of folks, but this was our first go round. I'm personally not going to run again. Another candidate has said that they're not going to run again. But my understanding is that the coalition is going to continue to have a Defenders of Justice slate every election cycle. And if that happens, I think that is a tremendous service to the electorate in LA County, because it's really letting LA County voters know that there are other choices out there. So yeah, I am really proud of what we accomplished. And I was dismissed. I had tremendous obstacles. The LA County Bar Association rated me not qualified, and that's another issue that we really did education around, because the LA County Bar Association bar rating committee is made up of mostly prosecutors and corporate attorneys, And the American Bar Association, which does the bar ratings for at the federal level for federal judge candidates, Biden stopped using the American Bar Association bar ratings because it was such an obstacle to diversifying the bench, because it's so skewed towards, prosecutors and corporate attorneys and, frankly, white males. So an article did come out in LAist about the bar ratings, but it was the Friday before Election Day, so there really wasn't much time to really disseminate that article. But we did that on our own, and that'll be a base for future candidates to work off of.
So Jiyoung, how do you what are your thoughts about in terms of the results? We showed up on the screen the results, the election, and you mentioned that there has finally been a public defender who's been elected. What was your feeling about that, and in relations to the differential of resources on both sides? How did you feel the results were?
Yeah, so the results really showed that in these very low voter information races, that a certain mainstream media news outlet, their endorsements were very, very, very influential. And when people don't really know who to vote for, they just turn to this very mainstream media outlet for their recommendations. And when you look at their editorial board, again, it is not diverse. So my message to people who are voting in these low voter information races is to look at who is making these recommendations. Who are they, and why are they making these recommendations? And in particular, in the judge races, I would say, there are people who say, well, if I can't follow their endorsements, then how am I supposed to determine who to vote for? And I would say you should look at their websites. You should look at their work experience, and have they been a career prosecutor? What do they do outside of their work? And I would also say, it's also important to look at their endorsements. So one thing that was different in my race is that I was very, very aggressive about trying to go after labor endorsements. There was a barrier in that many of the unions had never paid attention to the judge races and didn't see the judge races as being really relevant to labor. And so I actually, we were doing some education around that. And then a lot of unions came to the realization that who the judges are really does matter. I mean, I was before judges who were deciding cases on behalf of union members all the time. And you also see at the federal level, lots of judges making decisions about the viability, literally the survival of the ability of unions to survive. So it was, I was also saying that electing judges at the local level is building the bench for higher courts. And it's in these higher courts that make really incredibly important decisions about whether unions can really survive. So
That's definitely
yeah.
one of the most significant things I think that came out of your campaign, your candidacy. You're challenging the LACBA, I'm sorry, the Los Angeles County Bar Association. The narrative you had on that was so powerful for me. I saw you move LACDP, like, you know, you gave your answers as to what that meant and what not qualified was all about, and it moved the room. I mean, you blocked an endorsement. It was really powerful. And I think you bring up this union work is really significant. You know, you sought endorsements, you brought that conversation to unions, and how many judges are seeking union support, right? So
I mean, traditionally they were just seeking police union support. And so my opponent had the LAPD union support, had the LA County Sheriff's Union support, and a lot of like smaller locality police department support, Torrance, etc. And very, very little other union support. And she even got money from the sheriff's union. And so, yeah, I'm extremely proud to have started that conversation. And Unite Here, I have to credit as one of the unions that really got it and spoke up at the LA Fed and said, hey, we have to pay attention to these judge races. And then a number of other unions got on board after that. But I think that they really played like a leadership role in the conversation.
I think we'll really see a shift in the types of races, I mean, the types of campaigns judges and types of candidates we'll see for judges in the future. But just a ping pong, there's a question that was flagged by Stephen from John Kawakami. What is the demographic and political landscape of El Monte? What are the things that cause the San Gabriel Valley districts to turn progressives on paper into business Dems? Did you see that question? I can re-drop it in the chat. Thank you, Stephen. Stephen, I can't drop it in the chat. It won't let me copy, but Gabriel, that question is for you. What is the
yeah, I saw that. So demographic meaning as in as in race, a population, or what's the clarity? I'm trying to better understand.
Yeah, I would guess they mean the voters. What are the different types of voters and groupings of voters? I'm guessing that's what John meant.
Okay. So basically here in El Monte is predominantly Latinos, but also now the uprising of Asians now. So there are different types of Asians that are the demographic of voters out there. So in questions to the political landscape of El Monte, mainly now it's starting to be, it used to be back then, used to be more of a conservative back in the, more like in the 80s. But there is, I do agree with it. There's a lot of more Chinese and Vietnamese in El Monte now to that extent. But as in like political wise, it's starting to shift more progressives. And the reason to what caused the district to turn progressives on paper into business Dems, again, it's many years, a lot of people, is for example, in El Monte, are for many years, they've been lied to by politicians saying like, oh, there's going to be resources. There's going to be, for example, like rent control. But the problem is though, most of these politicians that they go in there with their intents of saying that the promises, most of them are being backed by special interests by means of that developers. Big, I'm talking about real estates, right? For example, there was supposed to be a housing, affordable housing, right by the bus station of El Monte. You probably heard of the Gateway Project. So for example, so there's a lot of families that are income families that are trying to apply for housing, that they can't get in, either because again, there's the limited to resources, or there's just not enough signups for that. So a lot of people are getting very tired, to the point where they go up to our city council members and saying, hey, we need change, we need some affordable housing. But the problem is, though, I noticed that to rent, I was looking the one that says Chavez that just opened up. The minimum that I remember was like 1,500 to rent, and it's for a studio, and it's something that is not affordable. Like why? And something like that, people are starting to, really get tired of it, to that demographic. And so it gets to the point where you got community activist leaders, not just from El Monte, from other surrounding cities, that, hey, this is what's going on, and asking for public records. That's where I want to see. That's something where it creates that when you start educating people about, public records, but at the same time looking at who are the donors, who are donating to these politicians who say that, oh, I'm a progressive, I'm a Democrat. But the problem is, though, if you're saying that, if you're using your identity politics, but you're being backed by special interests, that's where a lot of demographics here in El Monte are starting to be turned away. Even I even had my campaign, and I had someone that was speaking in Chinese that was translating for me. This elderly lady was telling me that, yeah, that she tried to apply for housing programs, like for rent assistance, and there's no translation. That's something that I'm trying to provide, is different languages, but also at the same time making sure that what are the resources that are still out there that are viable, because they can say there's resources, but what resources are there for? Is it for those who supported that politician? We can give you that resources, or versus those who are against it, they tend to stand away, because there's variety. So to answer to that question on that, and that's what drives a lot of people tired of it. And this is where, people like myself and others, like, community leaders out there that are really, that are actually, out there in the fight. So I can't tell the name of this lady, because again, I'm protecting their names. Again, I don't want to go into that detail, into that route. Again, most of them are very scared, because the reason I ask that, because when you have politicians that have high power, that they think have high power, and those residents who speak, most of them either work for a certain governments, and they don't want to get targeted. And that is something that I'm trying to very protect on that. And this is something that it gets very dirty here in El Monte. And if you're a person who works for like a government and you speak up and against them, there's a lot of consequences. They can have a little influence, and I'd rather not touch that subject on that. I can go more detail and technical on that, but yeah. So to answer to John's question, there is a demographic. It's a lot of Chinese and Vietnamese as well. It's starting to be more populated here in El Monte.
Thank you. Well, I mean, you kind of touched on it, and question for both of you, really back to your campaigns, was the Asian community, this is Reggie's question, was the Asian community crucial to your campaign? And how do you communicate in different languages on a budget?
That's an interesting question. I mean, yes, the Asian community was important. Interestingly enough, there weren't a ton of Asian American orgs that got behind the Defenders of Justice and myself.
Why do you think that is? Did you seek it? Was it
That is a very good question. I feel like a lot of the advocacy orgs that are Asian tend to be nonprofits. And nonprofits can't endorse candidates. And then when we get to like Dem clubs, I don't know why. I don't know why a lot of the Asian ones did not endorse me in particular. There was a sense, there was this concern apparently about, you know, whether I could be a judge because I was an advocate. And when I was an executive board member in the state, in the California Democratic Party, you know, I was a progressive voice. And I think that there was frankly some retaliation. So yeah, that I think that played a part amongst some people.
Yeah,
But-
running for judge is interesting. I feel like you have to hide so much. You know, your party affiliation isn't a huge thing. I guess you could talk about the issues you support. But I mean, maybe
Yes.
talk a little bit about that for anybody who doesn't know what it's like to run for judge, because you've supported other more traditional types of candidacies where you kind of go hard with whether it's party or issues.
Yeah, so
affiliation.
as judicial candidates, you know, they're nonpartisan.
Uh-oh, looks like we lost her.
All right, we can come back. Gabriel, I've seen you speak a little bit at LACDP. I feel like there's definitely a dissenter when you're a dissenter in the room, but I imagine you've probably been a different type of voice in your own for your own city council. Is there a contrast between the Gabriel that maybe some of us have seen at LACDP versus in your own community?
Actually, I'm actually the same person, to be honest. So there's no like where I have to have two masks, where I have to be like one, I have to be fake, or one authentic. For me, it's you're gonna see me authentic as it gets. So for me, is like I'm gonna tell you as it is directly, and if people don't like it with respects, then if you can't handle it, then there's old saying, if the hot's too hot, do not touch the stove, right? So for me, it's always been very vocal, something that I see that if I see something wrong, even at LACDP, I know I'm an alternate. I know I've been censured as well too. I mean, not to speak, but at the same time to be cut off, right? Same thing with the city council. So for me, it's like I want to speak, but the problem with the difference between LACDP now with the Zoom, it's like they block off the chat. That's censorship, and that is something that, regardless of who you supported or not supported, you know, democracy is about, hey, open up the transparency. That's the number one thing that I campaign off of that. Versus city council, now it's a whole different ballgame. This is something that, hey, you know, city council, it's open to the public here in El Monte, but there is times where intimidations where I felt like I was 5 times where I was ready to get kicked out, like really literally. And that's something because you didn't, I guess, didn't obey the rules. But there's so many things compared to LACDP, which is a private versus, you know, on that. So one thing about me is, again, I know there was something about it is very important for the Asians. It was very vital. I didn't, even though coming from a Latino that, you know, didn't have not very limited on resources to even I try to find out which organizations, or, you know, that can really help out to reach out, because a lot of this the only thing that I had was that helped me on social media, the translations were people activists out there, and hopefully if I get the consent, I'll say the name, but Katie Chan and other Felix were also helpful in the Chinese. And I did had other for the Vietnamese was Danny Hong. Sorry if I mispronounced your last name, but another one was helpful. So it was just more like a grassroots with people that can speak that language, that can send that message to say, hey, this is what it is on that. Now, as far as for translation, I did had one of my ex-neighbors, my neighbors next door, who also helped me out in translating for phone banking or text messages. So something was more helpful that I have neighbors that speak Mandarin and Cantonese and Vietnamese.
It takes a community. I mean, and I feel when volunteers volunteer and they're not looking for pay, like that's legitimate, like
Right.
help.
Exactly. And most of them were like, they took out of their time, and I respect that. And you know who you guys are that speak in different languages of the Asians. Thank you. Because again, it's a lot of people says, I don't want to get paid. And it's just like, wow. Usually because again, it's a whole, when it comes to campaigning, it's authentic, something. It's like when you make a food that you want to make authentic versus restaurants. Sorry, no offense to the restaurants. I like to make homemade, but anyways, that's something to acknowledge you. But yeah.
The community win. It's a community effort. Melissa, your hand is up, and then Taiji had a question in the chat. Melissa, would you like to go first?
Oh, okay. Thank you. Hi, everybody. I just want to say that I am astounded, I'm just astounded and super happy and proud, of course, that Gabriel has won. I'm astounded because he has never wavered. He just never, ever, even like after he, during the election, before the election, and years before, he's been going to city council meetings and speaking out against corruption, talk about speaking truth to power. I mean, just like every single time I've been there, and we've seen him on videos, YouTube videos, and I was there a couple weeks ago, and again, before, during, and after this election, and he still got elected. We don't need the establishment, backing. We don't have to kiss their butts. He's been ejected at LA County Democratic Party meetings along with myself from Zoom for no reason, really. We were all on mute, but yet he got ejected, so the establishment definitely does not like Gabriel. I mean, I think, Gabriel, could you nod if that's true? Is that true? Would you agree?
It's true.
Okay.
I agree.
I just want to be sure that that's true before I say that. But yeah, I get it's obvious, but yet you won, and you got, I don't know if you mentioned the number of votes yet, but I guess you could do that. But you got a lot of votes. People respect you, people recognize you for speaking out, and that's what I think a lot of the grassroots people, just grassroots, need and value in their politicians, where they, especially in Almonte, are sick of it, as we all are in other places. So I think, Gabriel, you're a great model for what we need to do going forward if we want to get more people like you in office. And I think that was all I wanted to say.
That was super helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
Definitely. I think that's a huge compliment coming from Melissa. Taiji, you have your hand up, so maybe you want to just speak directly.
Yeah, Gabriel, I think you were on our call with, Kenneth and Jane last week, and I think, but anyway, I know you've been following that campaign, and I'm not real clear on what exactly the city clerk does, but can you kind of talk about the role of the city clerk and how you might, you kind of hinted at some things about, making some records public or something like that, but can you kind of explain a little bit about the potential of your position and how it can advance the progressive agenda while you're in office and beyond?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we did talk, and thank you for taking the time. But yes, I think to your question. So a lot of people may or may not know what is a city clerk does, right? And that's a position that has been undermining. And this is where I tell people that the city clerk is really important. So those who say that isn't, you're sorely mistaken. So, but anyway, so a city clerk, what it does is it oversees elections, meaning like in El Monte, where let's say polling places, finding polling places, right? But also at the same time doing outreach, right? Providing registered voters, right? Going to events, right? For example, like let's say there's a city event, you can also have your tent to provide the vote, those who want to register to vote. This is the documents. Secondly, A city clerk does is, for example, a city council, there's a city council meeting whenever they pass an ordinance or anything effectively in law, right? The city. My job is to actually sign the documents that the city council approve for the minutes, agendas, right? The third is to get ready the agendas, right? That's going to be on the city council meeting, right? The fourth one is to really, making sure that the city council follows the actual the Brown Act, right? The Brown Act, meaning that they have to procedures of, hey, when there's the minutes going on, right? But at the same time, abiding by it, meaning like, that the fourth, I want to say the fourth is to public records. When residents, for example, I'll give you an example. Let's say when I spoke at a city council meeting and as a resident, I was like, for the record, I want this documents to be submitted whenever you speak. So what it means when I say the word I want it to be on the record means that my document, whatever I say or whatever I provide, goes to the city clerk. So for example, let's say John Doe says, hey, I would like to request a public records where Mr. Gabriel Ramirez spoke on this meeting on this Tuesday. And so there is a document where I said for the record. So meaning public can come to request records when minutes of speaking, meaning like whenever people submit documents to provide to the city council. Another one is to ask for, let's say, records for campaign donations. So let's say the 460s or 700s. What are those? These are just documents where elected officials like myself have to submit, a document said, hey, this is how much I make for the contributions, right? For example, if you give me money, I have to report that, right? So publics can come request for that to see. This is where we talk about corruption, right? Meaning like how special interests giving money to city council members or anybody elect. So you can see for yourself, this is the records that, for example, this council member received money from this towing company, which is controversial, right? So something like that. Another one is to, for example, like this is something where it's very rare, and I do get that a lot. Not very a lot, but very rare. Let's say a resident feels that was silenced at the city council by a certain individual of the city council member. Let's say the mayor violated the First Amendment. So as a resident, I want to file a complaint to the city clerk's office. So my job is to whatever any complaint that the residents say, for example, let's say a city council member harassed a member of the public, I will take that complaint, submit it to the city manager, and then from there do the whole process. So pretty much it's like basically a front desk resource, kind of like whenever you go to a library and you ask for like, hey, I want to speak for I want housing rights, and this is where as a front desk, I'll direct you to the librarian or different resources. Another thing too is this position is very neutral, meaning that a city clerk does not take any sides of any aisle of any political, meaning that it oversees the department, right? It makes it whenever, for example, like people want to run, for example, how do I run? So my job is to provide you the packets and explain to you what it is, what are the process. My job is not to be on one side or another.
Gabriel, I think it's really interesting the kind of parallels you're drawing with, work at the library. I think a lot of activists who are really effective have a really strong, almost customer service approach. It's like what's needed out there, get the job done, and have a non, like almost dispassionate attitude to be equal to everyone, and I feel you have that work ethic for the role.
Thank you.
Karen, you have your hand up. If you'd like to ask a question.
Hi. Well, first off, I'm going to apologize because I'm still kind of sick. So sorry if I sound like crap because I completely feel like crap. Okay, so actually I want to point out, yes, actually the city clerk is supposed to be a neutral position. But honestly, who benefits the most when the job is done properly? It's actually the general public. It's actually the left that benefits the most when this job is done properly. Because seriously, if the record is not kept straight, if public documents are not available, to the general public, then who benefits? It's the people who are already in power. And so the more you think about it, it's actually extremely important that leftists go for the city clerk position. And also that it remain an elected position, because a lot of cities are trying to turn it into an appointed position. The danger of that is that, I'll give you one example. Yeah, because first of all, I never followed municipal politics before moving to Glendale 6 years ago. But I've seen so many things on the public record that all I do is point to people like, on this meeting, on this date, this council member said that. And you know what? If this video were to suddenly, quote, go missing, guess who benefits? It's that council member who, and I'm the one who loses if I lose the ability to say, look at this video where this council member completely pointed out that he's against rent control. And that's why it might seem to be a neutral job, but it really isn't. You need to have somebody who's passionate about keeping the record straight, making sure the information is available to all people. And with that said, actually, what I wanted to remind you of, Gabriel, is that here in Glendale, our current mayor was actually city clerk for 15 years. And in Burbank, right, the former city clerk just got elected to the city council. So I do hope that this is not the end of the road and that you continue running for office, wherever that may lead you. Thank you very much.
We're up on the hour. So I guess, thinking about what's ahead in your campaigns, whether, Jiyoung, you had a judge slate. I don't know if that's ever been done before. That seems very atypical. Gabriel, you're running as a longtime community voice activist. What do you think is the work ahead, and how do you continue growing the movement post-election?
So so what I do is I still engage. Obviously, there's a old saying that once you're elected, your hands are tied. But you know what? I beg to differ. I'm still going to be that person to speak, but at the same time, right, be very careful. So what I'm trying to do is, at the same time, I already got is sending that voice to the message, right? So encouraging the public, doing the outreach, let them know what is the public records, what is the importance to attend the city council meeting, why should I attend, why should it matter? If I can't make it to the city council, watch it at home. And so look at it, take notes, right? This is what I tell the residents, but out there, and a lot of people are now starting to get more involved because they saw how not just myself, but my mentors and the community leaders that were out there, still out there to speak, but also asking for public records. Let them know that, encouraging them that you ask for records, or getting to know your city council members to see if they're BSing, because I know there's kids, I can't say that, or if they're telling straight the truth, right? So this is where you're going to separate and see which ones are the authentic, which ones are fake. So again, it's just reaching out to the people and tell them, call them out their BS and say it as it is, right? Say it more truth to power and be unapologetic, not being co-opted, because a lot of these community leaders or members of the public, they get co-opted, and that's sad, because again, you got the power political machine that, hey, for example, I got one, I'll give you an example. There's one that is no longer with us, but he was with us, but then at the same time, the ex-mayor, hey, if you speak on this side, then I can guarantee you, or whatever it is. For example, I'll give you a position you can apply for a commission. And that's where a lot of people get to the point where it's like, wow, I'm getting a position in something, but it's like, I can't speak. That's the scary part, versus me, where it's like, screw you. I'm going to say it directly. I don't care if I lose that interest of being in that committee. No, for me, it's about not selling your soul to the devil. It's to let the community know, speak on issues that are pertaining, that is more realistic. And it's that I use a knowledge, because I used to be boxing, where you punch them straight to the mouth, right? But also strategy with the stomach. But in politics wise, it's with words of saying directly of the facts, right? Unapologetic and exposed of who is their donors, but at the same time is who are they working for? Are they working for us, or they're working for their donors? And that's pretty much it on that.
That's great. And Jiyoung?
Well, in particular with respect to the judge races, I would just say, you know, talk to whomever you can about the judge races, because most people have no idea who to vote for. So if you put forth some options to them, there's a very good chance that they're going to listen to you. Because literally people are, you know, are just not engaged enough or plugged in enough, or even have the luxury to do that in terms of time to have done the research. And while voter guides are you know, were extremely useful and really helped us a lot, there are lots of people who just didn't know that they were out there. And so, you know, share the voter guides that you like. Create your own voter guide if you want to. Doesn't have to be detailed. And talk about why judicial races do matter. I mean, that a lot of people think that it's just criminal courts, when it's actually, you know, so many of the different types of courts that these judges can go to. It's including family court. And I spoke to a number of people who were like, you know, I was treated like dirt in family court. And there was one person, an attorney actually, who knew about the issues. Actually, she was actually referenced in the LAist article about the bar ratings. She's actually on the social equity committee, something to that effect, in the LA County Bar, and highlighted the fact that that the bar rating committee is not diverse, and that there does seem to be some bias in terms of the bar ratings. And what was my point? Anyway, sharing that kind of information, and talking about how the bar ratings are not the end all be all, and that they are biased. You know, all of that conversation around the judicial races is very important. And going back to the question that I was asked before I unfortunately was logged off, you know, language justice is so important, and was something that I really talked about a lot during my campaign. And as somebody who is, you know, second generation Korean American, most of my family members, they need, you know, they need translation. And if in court, you know, they need an interpreter, because they're not proficient enough to meaningfully engage in you know, discussions around who to vote for, or, you know, or participate in a legal proceeding. And so that is something that we started talking about, but really weren't able to implement to the extent that I had hoped that we would. So, you know, I put out one ad in the China Daily, put out one ad in the Asian Journal, which is the Filipino outlet, and I did do a bunch of advertisement on Korea, Radio Korea, but there were just so many other communities that we didn't even touch, and really need to be engaged.
I think it's always hard being the first to initiate these conversations, because part of it you're formulating and figuring out, you're working with an audience and figuring out how to make it land. And you really spurred a lot of important dialogue. And Melissa, as Melissa says, you know, I hope, Jiyoung, you'll put your name in the hat again. I agree. I feel the same way, you know, to continue the education, you can't ask other people to start thinking the same way you do, but to keep that dialogue up, and to bring greater focus to the judge races and let people understand how consequential they really are. And Gabriel, thank you so much, for holding open the door, having that approach, for being more accessible and pushing for more transparency and encouraging people to use the public tools, which are really assets. And I know there are probably other questions that we missed. If you'd like to drop them in the chat and ask our speakers if they're willing to engage, that's more than welcome, please do. But we're hitting definitely well over an hour. Thank you all, and it's always an honor doing these things. Thank you, PANA.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much
folks.
again. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny.
Gonna
Thank you
end
very
the
much.
recording. And I'd like to